"You're a monster. I despise you." The tomato struck him squarely in the chest. Its red pulp splattered across the crisp white shirt like a vulgar greeting. Arthur Vance blinked, his breath steadying in his old lungs. His heartbeat was a slow, heavy drum against his ribs, but he kept his expression serene. At 72, he had faced far worse than airborne produce. Only moments before, he had been sitting across from Julian Croft in a vast minimalist office, his gnarled hands folded over a portfolio of commendations and a curriculum vitae, worn at the edges from a lifetime of use. His voice had been even, though his palms were damp. "I understand the agency has provided you with my details, Mr. Croft," he'd said. "But I felt a personal visit was in order. I am available to begin at once. I have experience with children who have particular needs. I have worked for single fathers before." He paused, then met the younger man's gaze. "I need this position." Julian leaned back in his chair, a monolith of black leather and steel, and appraised him. "So does everyone else," he replied, his tone flat. "But not everyone arrives at my door with such quiet desperation in their voice." Arthur did not flinch. "My wife suffered a stroke last year. Her left side is paralyzed. My granddaughter is barely out of high school. We have fallen behind on the mortgage. I am not embarrassed to admit I require the income, but I am not here to beg. I am here because I believe I can be of service to your son." Julian's gaze sharpened. "You are aware of the situation you're entering, are you not?" "Yes, sir. Leo has already gone through 10 caregivers. He is angry, he is in pain, and he is intelligent enough to know precisely how to drive people away." The billionaire's eyes narrowed. "What is your strategy if he has a meltdown, if he bites you, if he attempts to push you down the stairs?" "I will get back up." Julian studied him for another long moment, then let out a sigh and reached for the employment agreement. "A 1-week trial. Accommodations, meals, and a bonus if you last beyond 3 days." "I will last," Arthur said softly. But he was not prepared for what awaited him just beyond that office door. The tomato was merely the opening salvo. As Julian turned away with a weary sigh, calling for Clara, Arthur stood motionless in the grand entryway, red juice seeping into his shirt. He heard the patter of small feet racing up the stairs. A few seconds later, something sharp dug into his ankle. He gasped, stumbling, and saw the corner of a metal toy car peeking out from under a Persian rug. He had stepped directly onto its unforgiving frame. A bolt of pain shot up his leg. He clenched his teeth, refusing to cry out. Instead, he drew a deep breath and bent to rub his ankle, his fingers tracing a shallow cut, already welling with blood. "Sir?" Clara, the housekeeper, appeared with a fresh shirt. Her eyes widened. "Oh, dear Lord! He got you with the tomatoes and the landmines." Arthur managed a small laugh, born more of disbelief than amusement. "He's resourceful. I'll grant him that." Clara's expression softened with pity. "Let's get you cleaned and find some ice for that." "I'll be quite all right," Arthur said. "I've taken harder knocks in my old neighborhood in Beacon Hill." That night, after a silent dinner, Arthur stood outside Leo's bedroom. He knocked gently. There was no reply. He eased the door open and peered inside. Leo sat with his back to him, focused on something he was hiding under his pillow. When he saw Arthur's reflection in the armoire mirror, he turned and snapped, "I said I don't want you here." "I know," Arthur said calmly, "but I am here nonetheless." "You'll just leave like all the others," the boy muttered. "I might if I am unable to do my job," he answered, stepping fully into the room. "But you have not yet given me a proper chance. You were injured today. I saw." His voice was smaller now. Arthur sat on the edge of the bed. "Yes, that toy car has a rather vicious fender. Do you always do that to people?" He shrugged. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because they always go away, and I don't care if they get hurt. Not really." Arthur tilted his head. "You cared about me, though. A little." The boy looked down at his blanket. "No, I didn't." "Leo, you asked about my ankle," Arthur said gently. "That signifies something." Leo said nothing, pulling the covers tighter around his small frame. "Listen," Arthur said after a moment. "I am not here to take your mother's place. I know that is a deep wound. I am not a perfect man, but I am stubborn, and I have never given up on a child. Ever." Leo did not look at him, but his shoulders relaxed a fraction. "Okay," he whispered. "1 week, then we'll see." The days that followed were marked by a quiet, incredible shift. On the second day, Arthur left a half-finished chess game on a table outside Leo's door. He found it completed by lunchtime, his own king in checkmate. On the third, Leo allowed him to tell a long, rambling story about growing up near the shipyards, and even laughed when Arthur imitated the sound of a foghorn. On the fourth, he fell asleep beside him on the sofa during a documentary about deep-sea creatures. By the fifth morning, he was tugging Arthur toward the kitchen, demanding he make the animal-shaped pancakes he'd promised. Julian noticed. He began to linger in rooms longer than necessary. When Arthur and Leo were talking, he would pause on the grand staircase, listening to them play guessing games in the hall. He stood at the top of the stairs for a full 10 minutes one afternoon, watching in silence as Arthur patiently taught Leo how to tie his shoes, using a story about 2 rabbits. That night, as Arthur tucked Leo into bed, the boy reached out and handed him a small, worn stuffed rhinoceros. "You can borrow Rory if you want, for your room. He's a good protector." Arthur smiled. "Thank you, Leo. I believe I will sleep more soundly tonight." As he turned out the light, Leo's sleepy voice stopped him. "Hey, Arthur?" "Yes?" "Does your wife still need you?" His throat tightened. "She will always need me, but she wants me to be all right, too." There was a moment of silence then. "I'm glad you came." Arthur stood in the darkened hallway afterward, his heart full, his eyes stinging. He did not know that Julian was watching from the shadows once more, amazed that the boy, who had not shown affection to anyone in years, had just given away his most prized possession. Morning mist clung to the massive Douglas firs that lined the driveway. Inside, Arthur was already awake, standing barefoot in the kitchen, trying to decipher the complex controls of the built-in espresso machine. "It's a touchscreen," a voice said from behind him. He turned to find Julian Croft, dressed in dark trousers and a cashmere sweater, sleeves pushed to his forearms, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. He moved with an air of permanent, calculated purpose. Arthur stepped back. "My apologies. I should have asked." "It's fine," he said, approaching the machine and tapping a few icons. "Caffeine is the one vice I still permit in this house." He smiled, grateful for the quiet civility. "It's a beautiful morning out there." Julian poured himself a double espresso. "I wouldn't know. I rarely look up before noon." Arthur wasn't sure if he was joking. The man leaned against the counter and gave him a long, assessing look. "So," he said, "you survived your first night." He accepted the mug Julian had poured for him without being asked. "Technically, I survived my first ambush. Now I am moving on to diplomacy." "Leo let you tuck him in." "He did," Arthur said, taking a careful sip. "He even shared Rory the rhino." Julian raised an eyebrow. "He hasn't shared Rory with anyone, not even Isabella." Arthur didn't react to the name. Instead, he asked gently, "Would you prefer I avoid speaking of her with him?" Julian's jaw tensed, but he didn't lash out. "If he brings her up, let him talk. Just don't fill in the blanks. Don't try to be her." "I would not insult either of you in that way," he replied softly. He gave a single sharp nod, then turned to leave. "Clara will review the household protocols with you. Leo's school drop-off is at 8:15 sharp, and do not give him sugar after 4 p.m. It turns him into a hummingbird." Arthur laughed lightly. Noted. And Arthur, he looked up. I know you said you can handle him, but if it becomes too much, just say the word. No one will blame you for walking away. He held the billionaire's gaze. I did not come here to walk away. Julian studied him for a beat longer, then left without another word. Later that morning, Arthur sat with Clara at the long kitchen island, a notebook in his hand. Mr. Croft is a man of precision, Clara explained, tapping her pen in time with a list she was reciting. Breakfast at 7:30, mail sorted by noon, groceries delivered every Tuesday. No one enters the master suite without explicit permission. Never interrupt him during a phone call. And do not redecorate. He likes things just as Isabella left them. Arthur scribbled dutifully. Understood. Clara's expression softened as she handed him a small, bound manual. This is the emergency protocol. Fire exits, panic buttons, codes for the front gate. We're not ostentatious, just cautious. Arthur smiled. My old apartment had one key and a prayer. This is an improvement. Clara chuckled. You have a good spirit, Arthur. That boy, he needs a steady presence around. He hasn't had one since Isabella passed. Arthur paused, setting down his pen. What was she like? Clara smiled, her eyes distant. Quiet, kind. She loved the garden, that Japanese maple out by the pond. She planted it before Leo was born. It turns a brilliant crimson every October. Julian used to sit out there with her every evening after he got home from the office. Does he still? Clara shook her head. Not since the funeral. That afternoon, Arthur walked Leo to the end of the driveway where the school van waited. He wore a small backpack shaped like a green dragon and scowled the entire way. Do I have to go? He asked, dragging his feet. Yes, Arthur said cheerfully. And I packed you a lunch with peanut butter sandwiches cut like stars. He blinked. Really? Would I lie about something so important? He considered this, then offered a small smirk. Okay, but only because of the stars. After the van pulled away, Arthur returned inside and made his way toward the back patio. The Japanese maple stood tall and still in the early light. He walked toward it, his fingers brushing against the smooth, dark bark. Later that evening, after Leo had returned and was absorbed in a book of intricate coloring pages, Julian appeared again in the kitchen, this time without his portfolio. Clara said Leo was actually smiling when he got home. He was, Arthur replied. He said a girl named Abby gave him a sticker for the best drawing of a kraken. Julian quirked an eyebrow. He didn't mention that to me. He was saving it, Arthur said with a grin. Wants to show you later. Julian walked toward the window and looked out at the patio. I saw you by the tree this morning. I heard Isabella planted it, Arthur said. He didn't respond for a long time. Finally, he murmured, She used to talk to it like it could hear her. I thought she was crazy. Now I find myself doing it sometimes. Arthur said nothing. She was softer than me, he continued. Quieter. Leo is more like her. Arthur tilted his head. Leo is like both of you. He is intelligent, cautious, and brave. That isn't all from her. No? Julian looked at him, really looked at him this time. You read people too well. I've had practice. He cleared his throat. I'll be traveling next week, just 2 days. I'll leave emergency contacts with Clara. Thank you for the notice. He hesitated. And thank you for staying. He met his gaze. You are welcome. As he turned to go, Leo barreled into the kitchen, holding up a crumpled paper dragon. Daddy, look what I made. Julian took the dragon, visibly uncertain how to react. Arthur gave him a subtle look. Say something. It's fierce, he said finally. Leo beamed. Arthur helped me fold the wings. Julian looked at Arthur again. Of course he did. That night, as Arthur tucked Leo in, the boy whispered, Can you stay? Just until you fall asleep, he nodded, sitting beside him. He clutched Rory and murmured, I think Daddy likes you. Arthur smiled in the dark. Perhaps he's warming up. Like the pancakes? Exactly. Downstairs, Julian stared at the paper dragon on his desk. He didn't know what to do with it, so he placed it gently next to a framed photo of Isabella. For the first time in years, the office didn't feel quite so cold. Rain drizzled softly against the windows, a steady rhythm that had always soothed Arthur. But inside the Croft estate, comfort was a fragile commodity, constantly earned and rarely assumed. It was Arthur's 4th morning, and Leo had yet to allow him to walk him into school without a theatrical protest. I'm not going today, he declared, standing at the foot of the staircase in his pajamas, arms folded defiantly. Arthur knelt beside him. You said yesterday you liked the new clay they gave you. That was yesterday. Today I feel sick. Oh, where does it hurt? He pointed to his chest, then his knees, then his eyeballs. Everywhere. Ah, Arthur nodded seriously. A classic case of school-itis, very contagious. Leo narrowed his eyes. Is it? Yes, starts with a fake cough, spreads to poor math grades, and ends with your backpack spontaneously combusting. He blinked. That's not real. Only one way to find out, he said, handing him his dragon backpack. Come on, you can stay home tomorrow, but today Abby is waiting with that book of sparkly sea monster stickers. His defenses cracked just a little. Fine, but I'm not smiling. Totally allowed, Arthur said, ushering him toward the door. Julian stood in the hallway, sipping his coffee as he watched the scene unfold. You bribed him with stickers? He asked as Arthur passed. Bribe is such a negative word. I prefer incentive-based negotiation. Julian didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched. That was something. Later that afternoon, the Seattle sky had settled into a soft gray. Arthur wandered into the library, a room with soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling shelves, and a fireplace that hadn't seen a flame in years. He found a worn book on child development, curled up in a reading nook, and lost himself in its pages. The peace was shattered by a crash from upstairs. He dropped the book and ran. Leo's room was open but empty. Panic pricked his skin. Then he heard it, a stifled sob coming from farther down the hall. He followed the sound slowly, cautiously, past guest rooms and linen closets until he reached a small utility closet near the end of the wing. The door was cracked just enough for him to hear the shallow, stuttered breaths from within. "Leo?" he whispered. Silence. He knelt and gently pushed the door open. There he was, curled into a tight ball, his face red and blotchy, hands pressed to his ears, his body shaking. "Hey," Arthur said softly, kneeling beside him without touching. "It's all right. I'm here." "I hate them," he whispered through clenched teeth. "They said my mom's in the ground, like a bug, and I can't see her again, ever." Arthur's heart ached. He remained still. "They laughed," he muttered. "Said rich kids cry too. Said my mom left because I was bad." Arthur's fingers curled into his own palms. He didn't speak yet, just let the quiet wrap around them. After a long minute, he said, "Do you want to hear something strange?" He didn't answer, but his breathing slowed slightly. "When I was 7, Arthur began, a boy at school said my papa left because he didn't love me anymore. He had passed away, but the boy didn't know that. He just wanted to be cruel." Leo peeked at him. "What did you do?" "I punched him in the nose." His eyes widened. "Got suspended," Arthur said with a shrug. "But it felt pretty good for a moment." Leo sniffed. "I can't punch people." "I know, but that doesn't mean it's wrong to feel angry or sad. Your mom didn't leave because you were bad, Leo. She got sick, that's all. But you were the best thing that ever happened to her. I would bet my last dollar on it. His small shoulders shook again. Then, slowly, he crawled into Arthur's lap and buried his face in the old man's cardigan. Arthur didn't speak, just held him there in the dim hallway, rocking gently as if he had all the time in the world. Julian found them like that 20 minutes later. He'd heard the crash too, but had held back when he saw Arthur, kneeling in the hall. From a distance he saw him wiping Leo's cheeks, whispering words he couldn't hear, saw the boy melt into his arms as if he'd belonged there his whole life. He walked away quietly. That evening, Arthur sat at the kitchen island, applying a cold compress to the wrist he'd twisted during the earlier commotion. Leo had fallen against him as he'd caught him. It was nothing serious, but enough to leave a dull throb. Julian entered, pausing at the sight. "What happened?" "An occupational hazard," he said with a half-smile. "Closet corners can be brutal." He pulled out a chair and sat across from him, his gaze direct. "Clara told me what happened." "I apologize for the crash," Arthur said. "I did not mean to alarm anyone." "You were not the one who alarmed me?" He looked up. Julian exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know what you said to him, but he asked about Isabella tonight. Asked if we could look at old pictures together. That hasn't happened in 3 years." Arthur's voice was gentle. "He is trying. He just needs a safe space to do it." Julian's eyes lingered on his bandaged wrist. "Let me call a doctor." "It is fine." "You are limping slightly?" "Still fine, always stubborn." He let out a small, dry laugh. "You're good at this." "At injuring myself?" "At making this house feel like it used to." "Warm?" Arthur glanced down. "I am not trying to replace her." "I know," his voice dropped, "but for the first time in years, my son is sleeping without nightmares. And it is not because of me. That matters." He didn't reply. Some things didn't need words. Julian stood slowly. "Tomorrow is Friday, family day at his school." "I saw the flyer," he said. "I cannot make it. I have a board call." Arthur nodded. "Leo has already asked." He tried not to sound disappointed. Julian hesitated. "You will go with him?" "Of course." He paused, then added, "He might ask why I am not there." "I will not lie," Arthur said, "but I will not blame you either." He left without another word. But that night, Julian didn't sleep. He sat in his office, flipping through old photo albums, Isabella smiling, Leo as a baby, all frozen in time. He glanced toward the hallway where a paper dragon still sat on a shelf. Then, almost without thinking, he set an alarm for 7:00 a.m. The next morning broke brighter than expected. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows, illuminating the stainless steel counters and polished concrete floors. Arthur was already there, sleeves rolled up, hair neatly combed, working a whisk through a bowl of thick batter that smelled of vanilla and warmth. Leo sat on a stool beside him, elbows on the counter, watching with exaggerated suspicion. "You're really making animal pancakes?" "Of course," said, pouring a ladle of batter onto the griddle. "This one is a bear, ferocious, unstoppable, loves maple syrup." Leo giggled. "That looks more like a blob." "All great art begins as a blob," Arthur said. "Just ask Pollock." He squinted. "Who's that?" "Someone who got rich for splattering paint." Julian entered mid-laugh. He was still in his crisp shirt and tie, jacket slung over his shoulder, clearly ready for work, but he froze at the sight of his son laughing. The smell of pancakes, the sound of bubbling batter, the soft hum of a classical station on the radio. It was all so normal, too normal for his house. Arthur turned and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Croft." He blinked, shaking himself from his thoughts. "Morning, this is new." Leo waved his fork like a scepter. "Arthur's making bears." "Clearly," Julian said, stepping closer to inspect. "And how is the patient today? No schoolitis?" Leo groaned. He told you? He did, Julian replied, and you know the rule. If you fake sick, you owe me extra chores. Dad, Arthur grinned from behind his coffee mug. I believe I have just been demoted from favorite adult. Julian looked at him, his eyes faintly amused. Don't worry, it doesn't last. He'll come running back when he wants dessert. Speaking of which, Arthur said, sliding a plate toward him. I made enough for 3. He hesitated. I don't usually eat breakfast. Then consider this an intervention. Something about his tone, light but firm, made him sit down. He poured syrup, and for the first time in years, the billionaire ate pancakes at his own kitchen table. Leo pointed at his father's plate. You have to eat the head first, otherwise the bear comes back to life at night. Julian lifted an eyebrow. That sounds like a scientific fact. It is, Leo said solemnly. Arthur sipped his coffee to hide a smile. You might want to listen, Mr. Croft. He is 5, but his logic is airtight. Julian took a bite, surprising himself with a laugh. I will keep that in mind. The moment was brief, but for Arthur it felt monumental, like he'd stepped through some invisible barrier that had separated father and son for years. Later, after Leo left for school, Julian lingered by the kitchen doorway. Arthur was washing dishes, sleeves still rolled up, humming something soft. Those pancakes were dangerous, he said. Too sweet? No, he said, half smiling. Addictive. Arthur laughed. I will take that as a compliment. He studied him for a moment. You really don't stop, do you? Even after he yells, fights, throws things. You keep showing up. He set down the sponge. When you grow up in chaos, you learn to remain calm. My father used to say, if you don't run from storms, you'll see the rainbow. First. Julian looked away for a second, as if his words touched something he'd buried. Your father sounds wise. He was, Arthur said. Even after he got sick, he still taught me to be patient, to see people as more than what they show on the surface. Julian nodded quietly. I could use that lesson. When he left, Arthur looked around the empty kitchen, the plates, the syrup, the laughter still hanging faintly in the air, and thought, perhaps this is how healing starts. Quiet, ordinary. That afternoon he picked Leo up from school. He was waving a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall, one small, and one older with gray hair. Underneath, in bold letters, he'd written, My Family Day Team. Arthur felt his throat tighten. That's beautiful, Leo. Daddy said he can't come, Leo said, looking down. He has work. I know, son. Will you still come? Of course. I will be your teammate. We will win the relay race and the art contest. Deal? He smiled faintly. Deal. When they returned home, Julian was in his study. Arthur knocked before entering. He is excited about Family Day. Julian didn't look up from his laptop. Good. You're really not going? He sighed. Arthur, I am on a call with investors from London at that exact time. Canceling is not an option. He doesn't need perfect attendance, Mr. Croft. He needs presence. That made him pause. Slowly he closed the laptop. You don't pull punches. I am not trying to, he said gently. I just see a boy who looks for you every time he laughs, and when he doesn't find you, he goes quiet again. Julian rubbed a hand over his jaw as if weighing his words. You think I am a bad father? No, Arthur said. I think you are a man who has been grieving for so long, you have forgotten how to live. The silence stretched. Finally, he said, I will try. That was all he needed to hear. The next morning, Leo woke to find his father standing in the doorway wearing jeans instead of a suit. Ready, champ? Julian asked. The look on Leo's face, shock melting into pure joy, was worth every sleepless night, every quiet word Arthur had offered. At school, the three of them ran the relay race together. Julian stumbled during the sack hop, and Arthur nearly fell over laughing. Leo shouted, "We're still winning!" And Julian, out of breath but smiling, lifted him high into the air as they crossed the finish line. Later, under a large maple tree, they ate peanut butter sandwiches and drank from juice boxes. Julian watched his son laugh, his arm resting casually near Arthur's on the blanket. He caught his gaze once, held it a heartbeat longer than expected. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me back my son." That evening, when they returned home, Julian stood on the patio while Leo ran ahead into the garden. The Japanese maple swayed gently, its crimson leaves like memories. "She planted that," he said softly, eyes fixed on the branches. "Isabella," Arthur murmured. "She said it would be in full bloom for Leo's 5th birthday." He paused. "She didn't live to see it." Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. "She would have been proud of today." He looked at him, really looked. Maybe, but she would have been prouder of him. Inside, the house was warm again, laughter echoing up the stairs. Julian stayed outside a moment longer, staring at the fading light, feeling something inside him shift. For the first time in years, he didn't feel haunted by what was missing. He felt grateful for what had arrived. The following Monday began with a chill in the air. Autumn had finally descended on Seattle, painting the trees with soft orange and amber hues. Arthur stood by the kitchen window, mug in hand, watching Leo run circles around the backyard with Rory, the stuffed rhino, tucked under his arm like a football. Julian walked in, adjusting the cufflinks on his shirt. "He has been outside for 20 minutes. He said Rory needed exercise," Arthur replied, his eyes still on the window. "They are training for the backyard Olympics." Julian smirked. "What is the prize?" "Apparently immunity from broccoli." Leo's laughter echoed through the glass. Julian paused beside him, looking out silently. "He has changed," Arthur said. "So have you," Julian replied. He turned to face him. "How so?" He met his eyes. "This house has not felt alive in years. Now there is music in the mornings, the smell of pancakes, bad knock-knock jokes in the hallway. He is lighter. I think he is healing." Julian didn't answer. His gaze drifted to the glass door where Leo had now fallen in a heap of giggles, tangled in a pile of leaves. "He told me last night he wants to be a veterinarian," Julian murmured. Arthur's brows lifted. "That is new." "Yes, he said he wants to fix animals so they don't feel the way he did when Mommy left." A beat of silence passed between them. "I did not know what to say," he added quietly. "You do not have to say anything profound," Arthur said. "You just have to be there when he says it." Julian studied him. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I don't," Arthur admitted. "I just say what I would have wanted someone to tell me when I was hurting." He nodded once, as if tucking that thought away. Then, abruptly, he changed the subject. "I have an event tonight, a fundraiser. It is downtown. Nothing extravagant, but there will be press." Arthur waited, unsure where this was going. "I usually go alone, smile for the cameras, shake hands, stiff drinks, awkward small talk." He hesitated. "But I was wondering, would you come?" His eyes widened. "With me, as my son's caregiver," he said quickly. "Nothing more. But the truth is, these nights are miserable. Having someone there who knows when I am lying through my teeth could be helpful." Arthur hesitated. "I am not exactly gala material." "You clean up better than you think." He stared at him, surprised. It was the closest thing to a compliment he had heard from him. "All right," he said at last. "If Clara can watch Leo, I will come." That night, Arthur stood in front of the hallway mirror, smoothing down a simple dark suit he hadn't worn in years. His silver hair was neatly combed, and the cufflinks borrowed from Julian caught the warm glow of the chandelier above. Julian appeared in the reflection behind him, straightening his tie. For a brief moment he said nothing. Then, "You look distinguished." He turned, smiling. "You almost sound surprised." "I am." Clara peeked in, holding Leo by the hand. "He has had his bath, brushed his teeth, and promised not to destroy the living room." "I did not promise," Leo protested. Arthur bent and kissed his forehead. "You be good for Clara." "Don't let him dance on the couch," Julian added, adjusting Leo's collar. "Why not?" Leo asked. "Because last time you almost cracked your head open." Leo grinned. "But it was fun." Arthur shook his head. "That logic is going to give me gray hair." As they stepped into the Blacktown car waiting outside, Julian turned to Arthur and said, "One rule. If you see me talking to a man named Marcus Thorne, save me." "Noted. How will I know it is him?" "You will know. He smells of cigar smoke and arrogance." The fundraiser was held at the historic Fairmont Olympic Hotel downtown, a massive building with marble columns and glittering chandeliers. As they entered, flashbulbs went off and cameras turned. "Mr. Croft, over here." "A smile for the Tribune." Julian touched the small of Arthur's back, guiding him gently through the crowd. His hand dropped quickly, but the warmth lingered. Inside, the ballroom sparkled with muted elegance. Waiters floated by with trays of champagne, and a string quartet played something classical in the corner. "Definitely not pancake territory," Arthur whispered. Julian smiled. "Hang in there. The first hour is the worst." For the next 30 minutes, Arthur watched Julian navigate the room with practiced ease. He shook hands, nodded at business partners, accepted compliments he didn't seem to hear. But Arthur noticed it, the glassy look in his eyes, the fake smiles, the seconds he stole to glance toward the exits. When Marcus Thorne finally approached, a broad man in a mustard-colored suit, reeking of old money and entitlement, Arthur knew instantly. "Croft, I did not see your name on the donors list this year," Thorne boomed. Julian chuckled tightly. "Still deciding where to invest?" Thorne's eyes slid to Arthur. "And who is this? A new acquisition?" Arthur didn't flinch. "Arthur Vance. I am Leo's caregiver." "Ah," Thorne said, waving his glass. "Raising the next Croft empire, I see." Arthur smiled politely. "Just making sure he eats his broccoli." Thorne laughed a bit too loudly, then moved on. Julian exhaled. "You handled that well." "I was 1 second from giving him a broccoli fact sheet." They stood in a quiet corner for a moment, the noise fading slightly. Julian looked at him, truly looked. "Thank you for coming." "You needed a shield?" "No," he said, his voice softer now. "I needed a friend." Arthur's breath caught. "Is that what we are?" "I do not know yet," he admitted, "but I would like to find out." Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his brows knitting. "It is Clara. She says Leo is asking for you." Arthur reached for his coat. "We should go." He nodded, and as they left the glitter and glass behind, neither said a word, but both felt something shift between them, something real. They arrived home just after 10. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge and the faint creak of floorboards. As Arthur stepped out of his dress shoes, Julian followed behind him, tugging off his tie with a sigh. Clara met them at the top of the stairs, looking half apologetic, half relieved. "He is all right. Just woke up crying. A nightmare, I think. I stayed with him until he calmed down, but he asked for Arthur." Arthur nodded. "Thank you, Clara." He didn't hesitate. Within moments, he was down the hall, gently pushing Leo's door open. The nightlight cast a warm amber glow over the room. Leo sat up in bed, sheets twisted around him. Rory clutched tight in his arms. "Arthur," he whispered. "Hey, buddy." He crossed the room and sat beside him. "What happened?" His lower lip trembled. "I dreamed you went away." His chest tightened. "I am not going anywhere." "You promise?" "I pinky swear," he said, offering his hand. He locked his tiny pinky with his face softening. "I saw the stars out my window," he murmured. "I thought maybe you went up there, like Mommy." Arthur stroked his hair gently. "I am right here, Leo. I am staying right here." After a few more minutes, he drifted back to sleep, his breathing slow and steady. Arthur stood and turned to find Julian watching from the doorway. "He has dreams like that often?" he asked softly as he stepped out and pulled the door closed. Julian nodded. "He used to. They have been less frequent lately. But sometimes something triggers them." "Tonight?" He hesitated. Maybe seeing me in a tuxedo. It reminded him of her funeral. Arthur looked up. "He remembers that?" He was only 2. "But grief, it seeps in, even when you are too young to understand it." They walked together down the hall, both speaking quietly, as if the house were holding its breath. "Are you all right?" he asked, glancing sideways. He offered a tired smile. "I am better than I have been in years, but I am also more aware now of how much I missed." Arthur paused at the kitchen entrance. "You can still catch up." He didn't answer, but his eyes said everything. The next morning, Julian left early for a business meeting. Arthur stayed behind, walking Leo to school. As he returned, his phone buzzed, a text from his granddaughter, Sarah. "Grandma had a bad night. We're low on her meds. Can you call me?" Arthur's stomach dropped. He called immediately. Sarah's voice was thick with worry. "She could not breathe for a few minutes. She is okay now, but I had to call the nurse at midnight. She says we need to change her medication. It is expensive." "I will transfer some money today," Arthur said. "Hang in there, Sarah. Are you all right?" "I am managing," his granddaughter asked. "Things are complicated, but okay." After the call, Arthur stood in the garden for a long time, staring at the Japanese maple. It was almost bare now, its leaves scattered across the grass like memories. That afternoon, Arthur went to the study to drop off some forms from Leo's school. Julian wasn't in, but the door was cracked open. He stepped inside and paused. On the massive mahogany desk, tucked between a leather notebook and a fountain pen, was a photo he hadn't seen before. It was a picture of Isabella. She was laughing, sitting in that very garden, her hand resting on a small bump in her belly, clearly pregnant with Leo. Julian sat beside her, arm draped around her shoulder, eyes crinkled with genuine joy. Arthur hadn't seen him look like that, not ever. Something about it, about seeing the man behind the glass, the one before the grief, caught him off guard. He reached out instinctively to straighten the frame. "That was the last photo we took together," a voice said from behind. Arthur spun around. Julian stood in the doorway, watching him. "I was not snooping," he said quickly. "I was just dropping this off." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "It is okay. I forget it is even there most days." "She was beautiful," he nodded. "And fearless. Isabella did not care about the empire or the shareholders. She just wanted to grow tomatoes and raise Leo." "Do you still miss her?" Arthur asked gently. "Every day," he said. "But it is not the same ache anymore. It used to be sharp, like glass in my chest. Now it is quieter, like a photograph, something I carry." Arthur didn't speak. He simply stood beside him, the quiet between them weighty but not uncomfortable. "She would have liked you," Julian said, after a while. Arthur smiled. "She would probably be mad that I keep letting Leo eat pancakes shaped like bears." "No?" Julian chuckled. she would have joined in. There was a moment then where their eyes met, and something shifted again. This was not just boss and caregiver anymore, not even just father and mentor. It was something slower, quieter, a flicker of respect, of trust, of connection. Julian cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. "You are doing a good job, Arthur," he nodded. "So are you." That evening, a storm rolled in off Puget Sound. Arthur sat reading in his room when the lights flickered, then went out. He reached for his phone just as Leo knocked at his door. "It is dark," he said, "and Rory is scared." "Come in," he said, ushering him inside. He curled up under Arthur's blanket, Rory in tow, and Arthur lit a small candle on the bedside table. "Did the power go out when you were little?" he asked. "All the time," Arthur said. "My dad would tell us stories by candlelight." "Can you tell me one?" He smiled. "Okay. Once upon a time there was a brave boy with a dinosaur backpack." And as he spoke, his voice low and soothing, Julian passed his door. He paused just long enough to hear Leo's soft laughter, to see the flicker of candlelight, to feel the story weaving magic in the dark. He walked away with a strange warmth in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, they were becoming something like a family. The morning after the blackout arrived with a gentle fog blanketing the Sound. The vineyard behind the estate looked like a dream, rows of grapevines fading into the mist. Arthur stood on the back porch, wrapped in a thick cardigan, nursing a cup of black coffee as he listened to the world waking up. The quiet was broken by small footsteps. Leo padded out, dragging his favorite blanket and rubbing his eyes. "Is it still broken?" Arthur knelt to his level. "The power is back. You will have to wait another 100 years for another candlelit bedtime story." He smiled sleepily. That was the best one. He pulled him into a warm hug. "I will tell another one tonight. Deal?" He nodded. "Double dinosaurs this time." They sat together for a while, wrapped in silence and the morning chill. Julian joined them minutes later, his hair still damp from a shower, sleeves rolled up. "I just spoke to security. Lightning hit the main breaker panel. Should not happen again," he said, pouring himself a coffee from the pot Arthur had made. "Does it always take a storm to get everyone in the same room?" he teased. "Sometimes, yes," he admitted, glancing at him, "but I am not complaining." Leo looked up at his father. "Can Arthur stay forever?" Julian looked between them, his son with sleepy hope in his eyes, Arthur with a mug frozen halfway to his lips. He did not answer right away. Then, softly, "Let us take it one day at a time." Later that morning, Julian left for a board meeting in San Francisco. Before he did, Arthur met him at the front door with Leo's school report in hand. "Before you go," he said, "I just wanted to show you. Leo got his first excellent participation star." Julian took the paper, eyebrows lifting as he scanned it. He talked in front of the whole class about dinosaurs and why broccoli is secretly poison. Julian gave a low chuckle. "Sounds about right." He paused. "Can you email me a scan of this? I want to keep it." He smiled. "Of course." As he stepped into the car, he turned back briefly. "Thanks, Arthur." "For what?" "For making this house feel like home again." He didn't reply, but the words stayed with him for hours. That afternoon, as Arthur folded laundry in the upstairs guest room, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something about the timing made him answer. "Hello." A male voice, deep and careful, replied, "Mr. Vance?" "Yes. Who is speaking?" "My name is Dr. Evans. I am calling from Eastland Rehabilitation Center." His heart stopped. "Is this about my wife?" "No, she is stable, but we received a call this morning. Someone attempted to access your wife's private medical records." Arthur's blood ran cold. "What? Who?" We flagged it immediately. The caller claimed to be a relative, but could not answer the basic security questions. We have reported it, but I thought you should know. Arthur gripped the phone. Thank you for calling. Please increase whatever security protocols you can. I will follow up with you later. He ended the call and sat in stunned silence. Who would want access to his wife's records? He had only shared that she had suffered a stroke with Julian and Clara. Sarah knew, of course, but this felt like something else, like someone was looking, digging, and for the first time Arthur felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. That evening, Julian returned early from the city. Arthur found him in the study, poring over documents, looking more tired than usual. "Rough meeting?" he asked, entering with a tray of tea. He glanced up. It always is when the board starts sniffing for control. They think grief makes you weak. They are not wrong. It does, but not forever. Arthur set the tray down. You are still here. That is what counts. Julian looked at him, his gaze lingering longer than usual. Something is bothering you. He hesitated, then sat down across from him. I received a call today from my wife's care center. Someone tried to access her medical records. Someone who lied about being family. Julian sat up straighter. Did they succeed? No, but it scared me. He leaned forward. Do you think it is someone from your past? I do. Not know. Maybe. Maybe someone who knows about my connection to this house now, or someone who wants leverage. He did not miss a beat. I will have my team look into it. Julian, no. Arthur, he said firmly, you take care of my son. You protect him with everything you have. Let me protect the people who matter to you, too. He stared at him, unsure what to say. His voice softened. This is more than a job now. He nodded slowly. Yes, it is. There was silence between them, charged, tender, real. That night, as Leo slept soundly in his bed, Arthur sat in his room writing a letter to his wife. He told her about Leo's school star, about the pancakes, about how for the first time in a long time he was not just surviving, he was belonging. He paused, then added, I think I might be falling in love with the quietest parts of this life, and maybe even the man behind it. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside his bed. Downstairs, Julian stared at his security team's email. The IP address used to access Arthur's wife's records had been traced to a private firm in Los Angeles. No name, no client ID, but it was deliberate. This was not random. And Julian Croft, billionaire, father, widower, felt the first flicker of something he had not felt in a long time. Rage. And under it, a terrifying certainty. Someone was watching them. 3 days passed, but the feeling did not. The chill in Arthur's spine, the tension behind Julian's eyes, the silence between them that used to feel like peace, but now tasted of caution. Julian had not told Arthur the details of the investigation, only that he had people on it. But the more time passed, the more his instincts kicked in. He had lived long enough in uncertainty to recognize when danger was not just a shadow, but a shape waiting to strike. On Friday morning, as he packed Leo's lunch, he caught Clara watching him closely. "What is it?" Arthur asked gently. Clara hesitated. Mr. Croft's team called the gatehouse yesterday. They are doubling security. Said there was a possible threat. Arthur's hand stilled over the sandwich. "You think this has something to do with you?" Clara asked quietly. "I am not sure," Arthur said, "but it does not feel random." Clara nodded. "You want me to dig a little?" Arthur blinked. "You know how to dig?" Clara gave him a look. "Honey, I was married to a cop for 18 years. Before he left me for his patrol partner, he taught me a thing or two. I have still got access to some channels." Arthur managed a tight smile. "All right, Nancy Drew, let me know what you find." That afternoon, Julian returned early from a meeting, only to find Arthur in the backyard with Leo, teaching him how to skip stones across the koi pond. The boy who once screamed at him daily now clung to his every word. "Like this," Arthur said, crouching beside him. "Flick your wrist. It is not about strength, it is about the angle." Leo threw. The stone plunked directly into the water without a skip. Julian chuckled from behind. "Solid attempt." Leo spun around. "Dad, I made a splash." "I saw," Julian said, ruffling his son's hair. "Pretty sure the fish are organizing a lawsuit." As Leo chased Rory across the yard, Julian stepped closer to Arthur. "The security brief came in this morning," he said lowly. "The access request to your wife's records came from a front company, a legal shell, LA-based. No address, no digital footprint." "Meaning?" Arthur asked. "Meaning someone with money paid for secrecy." He swallowed. "Why would anyone target my family? We are not important." "You are to me," he said without hesitation. Arthur looked at him and for the first time did not look away. That night, a storm rolled in again. Not like before. This one came heavy and fast, wind pressing hard against the windows. Leo was already asleep when the power flickered, but held. Arthur could not sleep. He paced the hallway, his heart restless. The house groaned in the wind like something ancient being asked to bend again. He found Julian in the study, pouring a whiskey. "Could not sleep?" he asked, holding out a second glass. He accepted it silently and sat across from him. "Do you ever wonder what it means when the past starts chasing you again?" he asked. He looked at him over the rim of his glass. "It means it did not stay buried." He nodded, sipping slowly. "I did not tell you everything about my past." Julian sat back, giving him space. "I was a community organizer in Georgetown," he said. "Organized protests, walkouts, exposed some big people. When my daughter was 13, men came to our door and told me to stop. I did not." Julian watched his face change just slightly, like a door cracked open for the first time. "I had a heart attack 2 years ago. No insurance, no pension. I have been working since I was 17 to keep my wife and granddaughter safe. I thought I had finally outrun all of it." Julian leaned forward. "You should not have to run anymore." "I do not know how to stop." His voice was firm. "Then we will stop it for you." He looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because," he said, almost surprised at how easy the words came, "you walked into my house and fixed something I thought was broken beyond repair. You did not ask for anything. You stayed when most would have quit." Arthur shook his head. "I stayed because of Leo." Julian nodded. "And now I am staying because of you." The thunder cracked outside, and Arthur did not flinch this time. Instead, he whispered, "It is not just a job anymore." "No," he agreed. And for one long moment, the space between them shrank. Not just physically, but emotionally, as if their griefs had finally stopped fighting and sat down together. The next morning brought with it more than sunlight. Clara burst into the kitchen, holding a printed file. "You need to see this." Julian looked up from his coffee. Arthur turned from the sink. Clara laid the file on the table. "That shell company. I found a connection. A law firm in Chicago handled their registration. Guess who was on their board of advisors?" Julian scanned the document. His jaw clenched. "Marcus Thorne." Arthur blinked. "The man from the gala." Clara nodded. "He is not just a pompous donor. He used to sit on Croftek's board." Julian's face hardened. He resigned when Isabella passed. "He wanted control," Clara added, and the rumor was he did not like how Isabella handled the philanthropic funds. Said she was too soft, too community-driven. Julian stood up. "You think this is about punishing me?" "I think," Clara said, "he is trying to rattle you, and Arthur is your easiest target." Arthur felt his stomach twist. "So he is coming after me to hurt you." Julian did not hesitate. "Then we make the first move." He turned to Arthur. "We are not going to let him twist this into something we react to. We act first, starting now." "And how do you plan to do that?" he asked. Julian's eyes were steely. "By showing him exactly what I protect and how far I will go to keep it safe." As the house buzzed with movement, calls to lawyers, security updates, digital firewalls, Arthur stood at the window and watched Leo play, unaware of the storm brewing just outside his safe little world. And in that moment he knew, if Thorne was coming for him, for them, he had underestimated the family they had become. Julian Croft had not worn his war face in years, but by Monday morning it was back, jaw clenched, suit darker than usual, every step sharp and calculated. As he entered the executive wing of Croft Tech headquarters, his assistants cleared his schedule without needing a reason. Everyone felt the shift. The lion was no longer asleep. Back at the estate, Arthur watched the news while folding Leo's laundry. The local business channel played a clip of Julian arriving at an investor summit surrounded by reporters. One reporter shouted, "Mr. Croft, is it true Marcus Thorne is suing for breach of board privileges?" Julian paused at the door of the summit, turned calmly to the cameras and said, "If Mr. Thorne believes threatening a child's caregiver will win him a seat back at my table, he has clearly forgotten who built the table in the first place." Arthur's heart stopped. He sat frozen, one of Leo's T-shirts limp in his hand. Clara whistled from the kitchen. "He just called out a billionaire on national television." Arthur stood. "He made it public." "Which means Thorne cannot operate from the shadows anymore," Clara said. "It is smart. It is dangerous." Later that afternoon, Julian called Arthur from his office. "I wanted you to hear it from me first," he said. "We filed an injunction against Thorne's company, frozen his assets, launched an audit into his last 2 projects. He is going to feel it." Arthur's voice was quiet. "What if he pushes back harder?" "Then he will learn what happens when you try to weaponize a good man's past." He did not speak for a moment. Finally, he said, "You stood up for me publicly." "Because I should have sooner," Julian replied. "Isabella once said, 'People do not need protection. They need someone to believe them loud enough that others start to listen.' I did not understand that until now." Arthur swallowed hard. "Thank you." "No, Arthur," he said. "Thank you." That evening, while Leo played with Legos in the living room, Arthur sat with Julian in the den, stacks of files spread across the coffee table. They were researching Thorne's old contracts, looking for anything missed, anything Isabella might have flagged before her death. "I remember this one," Julian said, tapping a folder. "It was a solar power initiative. Isabella said the numbers did not add up." "Did she ever file a report?" "She died 2 weeks later." They both went quiet. Then Arthur said, "You think Thorne had something to do with that?" Julian did not answer directly. "She was working on something behind my back. She told Clara, and then she was gone. I do not know if that is coincidence or if I did not listen when it mattered most." Arthur leaned closer. "Then let us listen now." They kept reading, and then, near the bottom of one contract, Arthur found it. A discrepancy in the charity disbursement figures. A dummy nonprofit listed as a recipient of millions, but with no physical address and no digital footprint. "This is it," he whispered. Julian nodded slowly. "It is the same firm that handled your wife's records." The room felt colder. "This is not about the board," he said. "It is about erasing everything Isabella tried to expose," Arthur added, "and anyone connected to her legacy." "Like you," Julian finished. 2 days later, Julian called a press conference. The room was packed, journalists, stakeholders, even competitors leaning in to hear what he would say. Arthur stood in the back, out of view, his hands clasped tightly. Julian stepped to the podium. My wife, Isabella Croft, died 3 years ago, and for 3 years I believed her death was a tragic accident. But in the past week, we have uncovered evidence that points to corporate fraud, manipulation, and obstruction of charitable funding, all rooted in decisions she questioned before her death. The room fell silent. We are launching a full-scale investigation into every philanthropic initiative Croft Tech funded between 2015 and 2021. I am also announcing a new internal ethics committee, led by an independent watchdog, and a $10 million fund to support whistleblowers inside this company. Reporters fired questions. Julian raised a hand. And to anyone who thinks this is a distraction from business, understand this. Justice is not a PR strategy. It is our foundation. Applause broke out. Not loud, but meaningful. From the back, Arthur saw him, really saw him. A man no longer just grieving or surviving, a man fighting for the truth. That night, Arthur found Leo asleep with Rory tucked under his arm and a small flashlight still on under the covers. He gently pried it from his hand, tucked him in, and kissed his forehead. Then he stepped out onto the porch, where Julian stood, looking out over the vineyard. I never thought this house would feel safe again, he said. It does now, he replied softly. He looked at him. You helped me become the kind of man Isabella would be proud of. He shook his head. You did that yourself. I just needed someone to remind me who I was. Their eyes met, the quiet between them now filled with something blooming and unspoken. You are not just part of this story anymore, Arthur, Julian said. He stepped closer. I know. And for the first time, they did not move away from the closeness, did not fill the silence with small talk or duty. They just stood under the stars, shoulder to shoulder, two men once broken, now beginning again. It had been 10 days since the press conference, 10 days since Julian Croft declared war not just on corruption, but on ghosts. And still the ripples had not stopped. Shares dipped, then climbed. Thorne's name disappeared from headlines, but whispers filled every corridor of corporate America. But inside the Croft estate, life was finding a new rhythm. Arthur was seated at the kitchen table, helping Leo build a science project volcano. Flour, vinegar, and red food coloring were scattered across the counter. Rory was dressed as a safety officer, complete with plastic goggles. "This is going to explode so good," Leo cheered. "You mean explode so well," Arthur corrected with a grin. Julian watched from the archway, leaning against the frame with a coffee in hand. For a moment, he did not say anything, just listened. A normal afternoon. A boy, his caregiver, and a paper volcano. He had not had this in so long. And yet, just beneath that peace, something stirred. When Arthur finally glanced up and noticed him, he smiled. "Want to help us destroy the kitchen?" He chuckled. "I think I will stay on the cleanup crew." As Arthur stood to wash his hands, Julian approached him quietly. "I have something for you," he said. He raised an eyebrow. He reached into his pocket and handed him an envelope, aged and slightly yellowed. "What is this?" he asked. "It is a letter," Julian said. "From Isabella." Arthur's heart stilled. "She wrote it 2 weeks before the accident. Clara found it hidden in one of her recipe books. Said it was not addressed to anyone, but I think it was meant for me, or someone like you." Arthur sat slowly, unfolding the paper with care. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, and full of life. "To the one who finds this. If you are reading this, it means something has gone wrong, or maybe you were just nosy enough to check the cookie jar. Either way, I want you to know. I have seen the cracks in the system, in the men pretending to protect it, in the lies wrapped up in spreadsheets and press releases. I do not know how to fight them, but I do know this. The truth has weight, and if enough people pick it up, it becomes impossible to ignore." Julian thinks I am just a bleeding heart. Maybe I am, but I believe that a company, like a family, should be a place where people feel safe. And if someone is reading this, I hope you still believe that too." Arthur finished it in silence. His eyes were damp, but his hands were steady. "She saw it coming," he whispered. Julian nodded. "She always saw more than I did." Arthur folded the letter again. "She did not know it then, but she passed that weight on. To you," he said, "and now maybe to both of us." That evening, while Julian was in a strategy call, Arthur sat with Leo in the reading nook. He picked a book about animals who solved crimes. Detective Rhino and the Case of the Missing Bananas. Arthur could not stop smiling as he read aloud, Leo gasping at every twist. Then, softly, Leo asked, "Arthur, what is a legacy?" He blinked. "Where did you hear that word?" "Dad said you were part of Isabella's legacy." Arthur hesitated, then said, "A legacy is something people remember you by. It is not just what you do, it is what you leave behind." "Like pancakes?" He laughed. "Sure, pancakes count." He grew thoughtful. "I want to leave behind a world where rhinos can be detectives." "Then do it. That is a pretty good start." He yawned, curling into his side, the book slipping from his lap. Downstairs, Julian stood at the wine cellar's edge, staring at a bottle with Isabella's handwriting on the label. For the right moment. He did not open it. Not yet. Instead, he picked up his phone and sent a single text to Arthur. "You are part of something Isabella would have.